Are you on your deck of back?
Yeah.
Oh, so nice. So did you move onto your deck or because you were at a different spot last time? Were you still on the deck?
Uh,
Was it a
no, same thing. I just moved positions. Yeah, the sun was in
got it.
my eyes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we alive?
Nice.
We
All
are
right.
live, in
Live right
fact.
now.
Huh. So we are,
Nice.
this is a different kind of stream because last night a big storm blew through. I'll say this a couple times so people know, but a big storm blew through town and knocked out the electricity of the almost the entire town. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
university and everything. And so, right up there, Elijah.
Say that again. You cut out for like the
My
last two
neighbor said that a
seconds.
lot of the internet was.
Yeah,
My
man.
neighbor said a lot of the internet around campus is still out. Yeah.
Yep, I haven't checked since I was at home this morning, but I haven't had Wi-Fi. My electricity turned on at like 11:45 last night. Um, but yeah, I didn't have Wi-Fi when it turned on, so I'm hoping there's Wi-Fi when I get back.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. We've got nothing.
You
So I have a
you
generator. So I've been powering the refrigerator.
Yeah. I was wondering who had a generator of on our team, because I was like, I bet DJ's fine. But I guess I assumed that she had a
DJ,
generator for
yeah,
some
they have a
reason.
generator. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they have a small one. It's
It
crazy,
was
man. What
crazy.
you realize is how, no, you realize how dependent we are on electricity for everything. It's
Yeah,
really, really unsettling, actually.
it is. It feels like it's one of those feelings like when you don't have your phone or you like you just feel paralyzed a little bit,
Yeah.
you know?
People will say, well, it's a good opportunity to just relax and just have some candles on and so on. And that's true. But when, work, like this is the last week of the semester, man. So there's so much happening. And, we're getting emails from students saying like, hey, I can't study for the third exam tomorrow. What do I do? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Do
Yeah,
whatever you want to do.
what do you do about that as a professor?
I don't
Because like because
know.
students sorry Sam, it's cutting out a little bit on you.
Am I cutting out or you?
I think it's from your end, but wait, Jeff, are you experiencing this?
Yeah, it's definitely your internet. So one of the issues right now with this power outage in State College is Xfinity is also out, and therefore everybody is using their cell phone data, and that's clogging up AT&T and T and Verizon and everybody else. Um, so Sam, it might be best if you go off camera just so that we can hear you, um, and that you come in clearly.
There you go. Turn my
Yeah,
camera on.
that's
All right. There we go. All right. All right. I'll
but
just talk. Hey, so
we were you should have seen
yeah, it's really.
Sheets yesterday.
Want to say that again?
I was just amazed by the gas station. It's like that turned into the new hub. I felt like I went to the gas
Yeah.
station later at night after
Yeah.
all the power went out, and everybody was there. It was just so interesting how, when people um they'll just do anything they can to find resources, and they're like went straight to Sheets. It felt like the whole town was at Sheets.
Yeah. Get more like toilet paper. Oh my God.
I
All right.
kind
So
of
listen, uh, last week, go ahead. What's that?
no, I was you're still cutting out just a little bit, but I was missing the joke on I was like, dang, I missed the toilet paper joke.
No, man. During COVID, everybody bought toilet paper for some reason. I have no idea why.
Oh yeah.
It's really weird. It's a sociological phenomenon, that people will make a run on certain products, and it'll be different for each person, right?
Are
Like,
there
or
diff
each situation.
Right. Was there a different product during other
So
crises in
like
your
gas.
time?
No, yeah, there were. Yeah, in different countries had different things that people went and bought. So I forget, I read an article, they were kind of listing a lot of the different things, but it's funny, but gasoline during a power outage is the kind of thing that people seem to want. Even if they have half a tank, man, they somehow decide they need a full tank. I don't know what it is.
Right.
Even if they have a quarter
Ha-
tank, like, you're not going anywhere, man. Just like whatever. Relax. Yeah.
Right. How do
It
people
would be
charge
different
their
if we lived on
cars?
the East Coast.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's probably it, actually. You can do all sorts of things running your car, but
Well, well, I was wondering, like, how do people,
um,
like those that have like Teslas, and the electricity's out? It's like you can't even charge your car up,
yeah.
right? It's like, wow.
No, you don't, man. You don't. We yeah. Yeah, it's wild, man. It's kind of a weird, it's very strange to be in the world that we are in right now, with
Hmm.
with the modern reality that we're in, and
And like,
like
yeah,
all that means.
right. And like, what happens when part of that modern reality gets like taken away from when there's like a crisis, like how we respond to it, or
Yeah, exactly, man. It's a very very strange thing, man. But this is the world that we're in, right? And
yeah.
and it's the world we've created, and it just all it does is create new issues that human beings um, have to address, and that we will address. I mean, it's kind of like what it's all about. So that
Yeah.
makes it's a fascinating thing.
When you say create new issues, what comes to mind?
Well, like for example, um, we have in the modern age, we got to deal with this thing called electricity because we need electricity to do everything, whatever it
Hmm.
is, man, we need to have that. And so,
Hmm.
we have to, so we've got to figure out all these workarounds for the, for electricity, and, wait, hang on a
Hmm.
second. I'm trying to get on trying to open the chat,
You know what's
but
funny is like is yesterday I was like how does a university town like not have like a backup plan or something like that. I was just thinking that because of the type of town that we're in where people need electricity so bad. They just everybody needs it. But it was so funny your voice like came into my head when I was thinking that. I was like, "Come on, man, just because it's this town doesn't mean that like crises or like things can't happen." But like the like entitled part of me was like, "This town is Penn State town. Like, how does this happen?" And then your voice it kind of settled me like, of course this can happen, or um
well,
if
yeah,
that makes
we'll think
sense.
about we'll think about what it would take for the university. I mean, you really need an entire backup system, right? I mean, think about that. And you can't have that. So,
How do
you're
we not
stuck at
like
some level. I mean, we have backup. Well, you have backup generators there are all sorts of things for which we have backup generators all over campus. And every hospital, just like every hospital has a backup generator and so on, right? So,
right?
massive generators. So there are some around campus for the critical things. And
And then
I'd like to speak with somebody in IT because my bet is in IT, some of our servers have backup generators and they kicked in right away when
mm,
things go down. you know. But
Right. And I
only,
was
but
like,
not for everything, right?
and it's right, not for everything. Like so many apartments are down now, where students have
Yeah.
to like go to different places to try to get their stuff done. And like part of me, like another entitled part of me was like, man, like if Penn State has all these resources, like they should support that. But obviously it's more complicated than
Yeah.
that.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's intense. No,
Wow.
it literally takes reproducing a system. And then how do you know your back system is functioning, right? Like, so I have a generator that operates on propane, so I just have to keep propane tanks available all the time for when I use it. And
Hmm.
so when I bought the generator, when we bought it 8 years ago, we bought 2 tanks of propane, and we have 2 full tanks of propane because we have never used it. Electricity is not for long enough. We really need it. So it's
Uh, so you've never needed to use your backup propane? What do you use it for in your house? For the heat?
we don't, no, we don't use it for anything. So, it's just that in our this little shed. So, and we bought it before we had natural gas. So you think like the human systems are just incredibly complicated in this way, right?
Right,
And
right,
backup plans have to be fully functional at any moment, all the time, and foolproof. So they can't go down if you're going to invest the resources in backup systems. So whether it's water filtration or whatever it is, like when electricity goes off, the water filtration stops, right? So there's a backup system there for sure. But yeah,
right.
it's so intense, man. It's really fascinating.
And
um
it's
we are
I can just
we
imagine.
like a lot. Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, no, go. I was probably gonna go in a different direction. So what were you gonna say?
Well, I was
Slightly
thinking
different,
about some of
not.
these. Yeah, I was thinking about these dystopian new movies and end of the world scenario movies, like this one TV series, Last of Us, right? And
Oh
I think,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, we're probably, I mean, on one hand, we're far away from that, and yet we're not, because whatever it takes to bring on something like that, it's going to happen very quickly and unexpectedly. And like, damn, man, and we're going to be there. And then there's not it's going to be difficult in a way to get out of, because it'll start spiraling. Things spiral.
Right.
and
So
and then
what
and
makes you
then you
think that
got
we're so?
social breakdown.
What makes you think that we're so close to that?
Well, we're both close and really far away. Okay, so like it's gonna, you think about COVID, and the COVID could have been so much worse. And you know, people now with hindsight, people now are starting to look back and examine it, and make all sorts of sort of snarky commentaries about how we overreacted and this kind of thing, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but but in the very beginning, we didn't know how many people it was going to kill. Like, we really didn't have any idea, and
Right.
how many people permanently did this kind. So it's really, but it could have been so much worse. And it's probably only a matter of time before we have some kind of virus like that really just takes out far more, 10 or 20 or 30 times as many people around the world.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
it's a it's a thing, man, you know. So on one
Yeah.
hand, we're far away from it, but we're close in the sense that it could be just that thing that pops, and it's kind of unexpected. When I talk to I have a friend, a colleague who's a really quite well renowned researcher in China. And when I talk to him about doing his research and what he sees and what's happening, It's like, oh man, it's like he's the most depressing human I've ever think about. Every time I think of him, I get depressed because
Wait, you cut
it's
you
just a lot of things. Huh? Did
what
I
was
cut
that
out?
last part? Yeah, you cut out when you were talking
I said
about
when I
the person.
the bird flu. Yeah, yeah. So when I think of him, I get really depressed because he like he's not an alarmist at all, but he's just saying, listen, man, we just most people really don't understand the nature of these viruses and the kind of harm that they can do.
Right.
So
Right.
this
How
is what I
were you
mean. Like
worried?
we're far away, but we are. It's at some point, it's right around the corner. Yeah.
How were you responding to COVID?
Well, I was being really careful as I possibly could. Lori and I both had the idea that probably herd immunity is the essential thing. In the end, it's going to have to be herd immunity. But, and we didn't want to take the vaccine until we didn't want to be the first in line. And that was a big deal, man. The first people in line to say, okay, we'll take the vaccine, even though they have been working on this vaccine for, a decade, right? I mean, wasn't new technology,
Wait, they were
so
working on
the
this
COVID vaccine.
vaccine for a decade?
Well, this family of vaccines, right? So this
Oh,
the type
okay.
of vaccine we developed. So but uh, this isn't like some brand new technology that came out of nowhere, right? But they push things forward in a way. And Lori and I, I didn't want to be we didn't want to be the first people to raise our hands and be like, all right, we'll get the vaccine. But once
How
people were
come?
taking it, yeah, yeah, and people weren't responding in a really bad way. I mean, the vast majority of people who took the vaccine, there were no short or medium term health consequences. And and the folks who know had the idea that, well, you're going to see something. If you're going to see it within a few weeks anyway, and we weren't seeing that, and so then I was like, all right, I'm down. I want to do it.
Like you'll see some type of symptom if
Yeah,
there's
you'll see some.
wait,
Yeah, you'll start seeing the consequences. It's not you're going to take the vaccine and millions and millions of people like a year later are suddenly going to have all these crazy health consequences. Now some do and some did. And for some people, there are people for whom
yeah,
the vaccine really harmed them.
yeah.
But by and large,
Wow.
it was what we would call a safe vaccine. So, you have to be,
So,
we have
so,
to be aware of that.
so you were slightly worried about that too. Like you and Laurie, just the consequences of even though it sounds like you know, the controversy over vaccines, but it sounds like you're pro-vaccine, and but there was still
Well,
a little bit of precaution.
well, yeah, I mean, I have a basic. Listen, man, I question power. And anywhere where all the fish are swimming upstream in a particular direction, I always question
Mm,
whether it's wise to swim upstream, right?
right,
Lori and I
right.
do. Like we're both like she studied statistics for 5 years, right? And I'm
Yeah,
a kind of a natural skeptic of sorts. So I'm not
right.
just pro-vaccine per se in that way. I mean, I'm not like that. I don't live in that world in that way. But
Right, right.
um,
Like not just blindly following,
but I
like
do
you.
believe. Yeah, I don't blame myself. Yeah. No,
hmm
yeah, go ahead, man.
No, no, no. I was just
I
clarifying.
Yeah, so here's what I would say, but I also am at a university and I have friends who are scientists and I have friends who are really really good scientists, chemists and biologists and this kind of stuff, right? Who who
Yeah,
are
what do they
doing
say?
who are doing biotechnology. Well, they're really smart and really thoughtful people, right? And
hmm
so I generally will I now like some people are going to join all the fish that are swimming upstream because
Yeah,
they just are, and including some, they're going to be some scientist wherever you go, whether it's social scientists or hard scientists or whatever. Like there are going to be those people, But by and large, when you see, people on the outside of science will have the idea that, well, everyone's just brainwashed in the same way, but they don't understand science and they don't understand what's happening. And they definitely don't understand these vaccines. The vast majority of people who critique them don't understand, have no idea how they work. Right. And so when you sit down with folks and you say, like, all right, man, tell me what's going on, tell me what's happening here. It's just a very, very different, it's a very different world. It's really thoughtful, really smart people. Not that I don't
Right.
question some things, because there are a lot of things that I don't understand, be it like what they're saying and what they're explaining. So some stuff I just got to go with on face value, but I don't like doing that. I never like just accepting a certain thing especially
Right.
things I don't understand, you know. But there are
Mm-hmm.
times when I don't have the time to go out and do the level of research that I would have to do, that I need to do, right? To understand,
Right.
biotechnology, right? And like
Right.
it's just absolutely not possible. And so what I do is do enough of the research, and then I turn to people who I think are really smart and really thoughtful people, and I say, like, give me a quick explanation of this, and tell me what you're thinking. And it's surprising how many scientists, people on the outside of science would be surprised at how many scientists who do research in this kind of way are themselves skeptics. But that doesn't keep them from doing their research. Like, they're not just sheep following all the other sheep across campus and into the labs. You know what I mean? They're actually
Right.
very carefully thinking about things. And I think people on the outside of any system don't really understand. Oftentimes think that we understand what's going on, and we really don't. You know. So
Mm-hmm. And I feel like
you
that's
know,
almost, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. Go ahead, man.
I was just gonna say it feels almost I'd want my scientists to kind of be skeptical. I feel like even
Well,
just so
science. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
yeah, well just I just want them to be skeptical so I feel like they're not falling into biases or
Yeah,
like or like interpreting data in a way that supports them but instead really just looking for the truth. It sounds
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
I think that's
And
great.
I would, I would say most everybody I meet who's really doing thoughtful work it has the smartest people in the room are always skeptics to a degree, right?
Right.
And so you can't. And I think also what people don't realize, like now there's a couple of people just wrote a book on COVID, right? It came out.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening to them talk about it, you know, and they're talking about, like masking, and how pretty fairly quickly we started to have a sense that, hey, this may not masking may not really help us in the way that we think that it's going to, and this kind of thing, right?
Right.
Um, and yeah, and it
But
kind of makes sense. You see people wearing just a loose mask over their face. It's like, come on, man. Like, But what you also got to consider is that there's the sociology of a pandemic.
uh-huh.
You're an entire
You're cutting
society
out.
to do what you need them to do. Oh, wait, man. All right, how about that?
Yep, okay, I heard that. Yep, it's
We all
better
right?
now. Yep,
All right.
masking and getting a
So
set
how
mask.
you,
Yep.
yeah, how you have to get you've got societies. You can't allow these like societies and nations to fall into a panic mode. Like,
Yeah.
you gotta keep control over a population. Dude, last night you were at the gas station. Okay, how many cars were there trying to fill up
It was
gas?
you couldn't find a I was lucky to find one parking spot and I almost had to fight someone for it because they were about to
Okay,
pull
there
in.
you go, man. Okay, there you go.
It
And
was
everyone wants gas, and everybody's afraid, and everybody, no panic though, right?
yeah, no
But
panic,
imagine
just
now,
a lot of
add
energy.
panic to that. Okay, now
Right.
triple the number of people there, right? And
It's
there's a
insane.
limited amount of gas. And so shit's gonna come down, and
You think
people are gonna
so?
be battling each other in the streets.
That was so funny
Yeah,
because
it's the nature of it, man.
I was talking to a friend yesterday and I was like, you know what? If like I was like, what if this happened like across the nation? If it was like
Yeah.
some type of national emergency. I was like, oh, we're in state college. I feel like we'd be pretty safe. That's what I said, but you're like saying something completely opposite to like what to what I said, which is
Well,
just
it would
so
happen.
interesting.
Yeah, well, it would happen on a very small scale. But listen, like, you go down to Florida, or you look at places where the hurricanes hit, and you have these evacuation routes, right? Everything is laid out so that if everyone just does, there's a plan in place, and you got to get everyone to follow the plan. And that's how
Right,
you stop the panic, right?
right,
You can't have that. So, but with COVID, we've never been in that situation before. So, you have
right.
something like, hey, you got to wear a mask. You have to, even if the masking isn't really helping, you got to
It
get
like
people to believe that it is. You got
it
to
like
get people to
pacifies
follow
the ex
something that they feel is somehow pacifies the experience that people feel.
yeah.
Because you got
It
to get
like
people to
it's
believe, if you got to believe that it's going to be okay, like, all right. And so a lot of people, they really critiqued, and now they're looking back and critiquing for, they knew the masking wasn't really helping and this, that, and the other thing. That's not the point, man. You can't have chaos, and you can't have people just losing their minds, because it was incredibly stressful, and the potential for like widespread violence was always there. It takes a lot. So that's what I think, when I see something like the electricity going out, you want calm. You want people to remain calm.
right.
Don't panic.
And it's like what was
So, like, don't
pacifying
go to
the
the store and buy all the damn toilet paper.
right.
Uh,
And yeah, I'm like, what was pacifying the experience or any, because that is so
well,
interesting. Like, I wonder if like people that are like in these rooms, like trying to think of a solution during COVID, what was it like who thinks of like the masking? Was it like CDC who like comes up with that? Or I wonder what other
yeah,
ways there would be to pacify the experience to make people perceive safety, because you're like, you want people to perceive safety, right?
yeah,
Like that's what you're saying.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and even if it might not be
That's right. That's a
scientifically
big part
true,
of it. Well,
it's so
first
in
off, yeah, yeah. Well, first off, masking does help for some things, for sure. It's not a question. You put a mask over your face, and you're like, it's gonna have some kind of an impact. Now, when you have these little thin blue masks that, the people don't wear them correctly, and they're okay, that's not probably, you're not doing
right.
much of anything. But the
What's
point
the
is,
mask?
there's at least an illusion of security, and you got to have
Yeah.
that. And what I think
Wow.
that, you know this things like the CDC and the government and so on, what people don't realize is that when it's like in Social 19, I'm in control of 700 people. Like, I organize that classroom because I have to control 700 plus people. So the room seat the class, there's 800 students in the class, and the room will
Yep.
seat about 740 or 750. Okay. And so
Right.
my job is to keep 750 people calm at any moment. They're sitting right next to each other. They're packed into this room. I got to keep everybody doing the things that we really need them to do. I don't be like,
Right.
if you're talking, if you're on your phone, you put your feet up on somebody else's chair. It's like, the
You're walking
potential
out
for
early.
disruptions, and you're walking out early, the potential for violence, all sorts of stuff. People getting in fights, people have yelled at each other and stuff in the room. And I'm like constantly
Right.
organizing things to keep things really calm. Right. So,
Right.
but
Hmm.
if you don't, or
What
if you're
skill
not thinking
set?
about that,
Yeah.
then this is how, for example, Joe said this. Remember when Joe, Ivanke, he said, look, sometimes you'll see cops just standing around and not doing anything, because what the cop is doing is they're trying not to ramp up the whatever it is, like the intensity or the pressure that's happening. So the best thing that a cop can do, you got a couple police there and some shit's coming down somewhere, people are breaking windows or they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. The cop is just going to stand around and let it happen because
Right.
they need to keep things really, there's a big crowd and you got to keep the crowd calm. And so,
Right.
people don't realize that. And if you don't ever talk to cops, you have no idea. You think the cop, you would never know that. And if you don't talk to people and who are responsible for societal wide behavior, you're not going to have any idea why you would pick masking out, for example, right? And then just stay on it. Yeah, you got a mask. It's important that everybody mask. It's like you can't keep changing back and forth because that
Right.
doesn't give people any sense of confidence that anyone knows what's going on. It's better that
Hmm.
you feel like the government has said you should do all of these things. I'm against it. I think that's a bunch of bullshit, but the government has said that and the government isn't wavering and they're saying like these are the rules right now. And even if not everybody's following them, at least there's a sense that there are rules and they're not changing the rules. So there's somebody's got some kind of control over a situation.
And
And
that's
and
interesting
that is
too.
keep going. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
no,
ahead.
that's interesting too because at some point during COVID, there was that time where like the nation was split, right? On like how should we
Yeah,
still be masking or should we not be masking?
yeah,
And then
yeah,
oh my gosh, Sam, my grandmother was like the type that was she's like a little crazy and in the best way. And she would go in with her sister and they would like go into the grocery store and they'd be like, "Yeah, I have a condition, so I can't wear a mask." She has no condition. And she'd be like, I can't wear it because she was like totally against the masking. And she felt like for her it was like
yeah,
brainwashing and like these things and she was just totally against it. And so she would like go to like the extremes of being like, I have a condition, I can't wear the mask and go in and there so
yeah,
but like during that time there was so much like when we were progressing through COVID, it seemed like there was a time of a lot of tension of should we mask? I'm tired of
yeah,
masking, but and it got to the point we were in Maine and my grandmother is hilarious and we went in this little small like organic shop in Maine and just looking around and my grandmother had like a little scarf over her mouth but not over her nose and there
yeah,
was this one lady who was like super pro masking, and I kind of let my grandmother have it. Like I wasn't a part of the situation. The lady was like, "Put your mask on," and she was like, "It is on," and she was like, "Your nose isn't covered," and the lady's like, "Put your mask on," and like I'm. Listen, my
yeah,
grandmother
yeah,
knows better, and I was like doing my own thing shopping, as like there's like this moment of like the person came over is like to my grandmother like please put your mask on da 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 and just like so fast for
yeah.
there to be like a conflict it just
Yeah, the
happened so
tension. Yeah,
quickly.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
this is the thing, right? And so if you're in charge of 330 million people, okay? And you think like we have to have rules and regulations somehow for 330 million people. And mind you, in the beginning, when we did not know how bad this virus was going to be, right? And people forget that, man. They have no, so a lot of people think like, oh yeah, I always knew it wasn't going to be bad. I'm like, come on, man. I talk to the people, they study this for a living. This is what they do. All the public health and viruses like this. And they were in
Right.
the beginning, the estimates were anywhere from 1 to 8 million people could die from this. Turned out to be one over 1 million people, but could
Oh.
have been eight. And lay numbers out and like, man, this could be this is not good. Okay.
And
So
it
now you
right.
already
Mhm.
established some ground rules, right? So it's like, okay, well then just go with those, man. You got to keep people calm. Like this is
Right.
things could, man, they could just be absolute craziness. Yeah.
Right.
So that's
And you know
so
you're making me think about Korea again, like South Korea. because you know how
Yeah.
like they would accommodate for their civilians. But like if and correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong, but the data said that most people that were like the casualties from COVID a lot of the time was those who had like compromised immune systems or were elderly. And I'm not that's what I heard. I didn't never looked at the data, so I'm
No,
not
for
sure how
sure.
true that
No,
is.
that's true.
But
No, for
but it's
sure.
like
The very few children uh, died of COVID or had long-term consequences from getting COVID. Yeah, long
right.
COVID. Yeah, for
And
sure.
is it like
Yeah,
how much of an indicator is, you know, because there was so much tension of people not wanting to mask anymore, but it sounds
yeah,
like
yeah,
based
yeah,
off of what you tell me from South Korea, that people would totally be masking no matter what because they don't want to hurt their fellow man. But
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
it
But
seemed like
yeah,
here in America, they were like, well, you know, like it's your fault if, you know, if you're like maybe overweight and you have a compromised immune system or, you
yeah,
know, and they're like, I
yeah.
don't want to take responsibility.
You're right.
So it's just, you
You're
know,
right.
and it's just
Like
uh
it'd be like your grandmother would look. We live in a world where your grandmother can say, "Hey, I, the most important person is me." Okay.
yeah.
So I need to think
Yep.
about myself and what I want to do and what I need to do to live a good life. Okay. And to be
Yeah, that's
happy.
definitely was
Right.
yep, that was where she was.
That's her. Okay. And
Yep.
that's Americans, people in the West here, especially in the US, we lean in that direction. It's like, what do I need to
Yeah.
do? I'll take responsibility for me. So in my car, I'm thinking about me. I'll do what's best for me. And if everyone does what's best for them, then everything's really well. It's basic, like Ayn
Right.
Rand ideas, right? It's pure.
Yeah.
This is the idea, man. If everyone is just acts in a very self-interested way, then everything works out because everyone is acting self-interested, and it'll be fine.
Ah, but
You
it's
and the
how it's
guy,
there.
the so here, go to the parking space last night. You're trying, you're going into this parking space right when somebody else was, but you pulled into it. So in a perfect selfish world, like self-centered world, right?
Yep. Uh-huh.
That person says, "Oh man, I wasn't quick enough," and that guy got it. And then he laughs and he says, "All right, I gotta go look for another space." He doesn't battle
Right.
you at all, right? Because he knows it's everyone is out for themselves, so it's fine. There's no upset. It's fine, right?
And
In
yeah, and that's
in a
go ahead.
Korean world,
Hmm.
no, go ahead, go ahead. Say it.
Oh, no, you can finish it because I'll
Does that
save
make
it.
sense? Does that make sense?
No, it does. Well, what it was going to make me
What I
think
just said
about
about the
was
parking space.
oh, for sure it makes sense. Yeah, and because the competing ideologies of we need to be selfless or we need to be for ourselves. And because you're saying that if
Yeah,
everybody was had the ideology of like it's every man for themselves and I need to be responsible
yeah.
for myself, then they would no longer be offended if somebody dis
Won.
decided
If
to
somebody
have
won.
like a
If someone beat them. Yeah, yeah.
right.
If someone beat
Yeah.
them at the game. Yeah, yeah.
But then people get angry because they're like, "Oh, you're not being selfless. You need to be selfless
Well,
right now, and you're not
this
being
is the
selfless."
well, this is the
And
problem. So we're not 100% there. Ayn Rand, if you read Ayn Rand, like the idea. Like if
wait,
you go
Ayn
all the way
Rand,
into Ayn
what do you
Ayn, it's we people say Ayn Rand, but it's Ayn Rand. And
and what
She
is
has
that?
she
she's an
wrote,
author.
well,
She has
she's
very
a
popular
writer.
books. Yeah, like The Fountainhead
Mm,
Like
and Atlas Shrugged.
Anthem, yeah, Atlas
okay.
Shrugged, Fountainhead. Yeah. And then, and she's like creates this world, this philosophy of just pure self-interest, right? It's like
Oh,
libertarianism to the nth degree. And it makes sense, right? But
right.
in Korea, it's the opposite, right? Your grandmother would be, hey, everybody around, if she was Korean,
Mm-hmm.
everybody around me is watching my behavior. Everybody around me is judging my behavior. Everybody
Yep.
around me expects me to follow what are the protocols for a given sociological situation. And so
Right.
if I'm not masking, like, oh my God, I'm going to be judged really harshly, right? Because I should be thinking about all these people around me. And I know,
Right.
and I believe that they're thinking about me. And so that
Right.
works out really well because, you never, and in Korea then, I was in these situations where like, we absolutely did not need the mask. One time on my first, in this trip, I was 2022, maybe, yeah, in the
Hmm.
fall of 2022, or no, the spring, it
Hmm.
was May. I, we were outside at the palace.
Okay.
Really windy day. It was like the wind was probably at least 15 miles an hour. It was just spraying everywhere. Everybody had
Dang.
a mask on. And I said, listen, man, people I was with, they said, you know, I mean, there were crowds of people, not tons of people, but there were lots and lots of people. And, any virus,
Oh, say that part. Say that.
if any
Say that
virus,
part again, Sam.
right?
Can you say the first
Yeah, I'm
15
gonna say
seconds
it.
again? You completely cut out.
Oh,
Yep.
all right, all right. Oh man, okay. So
You were
we
like,
were at the palace,
yep, yep, yep.
okay, and
And
the
the
wind is
wind.
going at like 15 miles an hour, maybe 20 gusts of
Hmm.
20 miles an hour. So there's no
Hmm.
chance of anybody catching COVID from anybody else, okay?
Oh, is that because
Because
of the wind?
yeah, the wind. We're outside, man. It's like a windy, gusty day. It's just like you're not gonna get COVID, But
Ah,
everybody
because the.
kept their masks
Mhm.
on. Nobody wanted to be the first one to take a mask off. Like you can't do that.
Wow.
Everyone knew.
Right.
Everyone knew. See, unlike Americans, Koreans actually believe in science. So, and a why as a big population, right? Okay,
Right.
Americans too, but Koreans far
And
more.
so,
And
is the
so they
science
knew,
here?
but they don't.
Is
But no
this
one was willing to be that person and get judged by other people. Yeah.
and so the science is because it's windy, there's a less likelihood to get the virus, but because the social pressure to be considerate,
Yeah.
people were like, despite the science, we're still keeping this bad boy on.
Yeah, yeah. It's not less likely to get it.
Right.
It's virtually impossible to get it. Yeah. By the
Wow.
time
Oh,
any
okay.
droplets, by the time any droplets would get to anyone. I mean, these big wind gusts, you know what I mean? It was like,
Yeah.
and everybody laughed about it, but nobody would take their mask off. And I wasn't gonna
See,
take my mask off because I'm like, ah, shit, I can't be the American that doesn't have his mask on.
right.
But
Right.
I was ready to take my mask off at any moment because I'm just like, this is silly. This makes no sense, right?
Yeah. That's so funny because like with my grandmother, she was proud of like the
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah,
the attention that she kind of created a little bit. Like
yeah,
suppose this
yeah.
coworker was like telling her to take the mask off like while they were in Whole Foods and she was just bullish with it, man, and just was like you had to kick her out. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. Uh
You know,
and so
this is the thing, right? So she's proud. Think about that. She's proud of making her the center of attention and making other people come.
oh, you're cutting out again a little bit. Oh, yeah, we lost you first. I don't know
Well,
where you're at.
while he's away, Sam.
Yeah, no, it's because somebody called my phone.
Oh, there you are.
So
Oh,
your
okay.
grandmother, yeah, your
Oh, and let me
grandmother's
just
like
say this.
proud. Yeah, go ahead.
And she also was like, hey, each like to each their own. Like she did have that perspective, like, hey, you want to wear a mask? Wear a
Yeah,
mask. I don't want to,
yeah, I
was
got
her
you.
kind of vibe. Yep, I just want to add that in.
Yeah, a lot of people, right? Because a lot of people were calling other people stupid for wearing a mask, and
Oh yeah, she was
and
one of those
you're saying that,
people.
yeah, she wasn't like that. Yeah, yeah. No, I got that, man. I think it's
But you wait, were you gonna
it,
give a
but
reflection?
no, but you understand that the issue becomes uh it's
But
very
I also,
complicated, right? Do you live for yourself or do you live for others?
well, for me, like with my grandmother, I was like, I call her my mom. I was like, Mom, what are you doing? Like in my eyes, well, because
Yeah,
I don't want to create the noise. Like in my opinion, just like you, like
yeah,
it's not worth the noise for you. And so I
yeah,
would tell her that, and I'm like, Mom, you're gonna face the consequences socially, whatever they are. You know what I mean? Because you're making yourself a target. Like to me, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And but she was willing to accept those consequences
yeah.
for her.
Well, and so again, that's an extreme case of living in an individualistic moral order, right? Which
Hmm.
is in other what is wrong based on what's right and wrong for me. And she's an extreme
Right.
case of that. But that but most Americans, we simply lean in that direction. Whereas,
Yeah.
people in East Asia, they lean in the opposite direction. And so, we all do things that really, I don't know, we don't necessarily want to do, but we do them because we don't want to make other people uncomfortable, right? So,
Right.
it's a thing, but it's a that's like living in a that's being a social creature, right? It's like if you want a good society, if you want a society that works well, then by all means, uh, follow. You got to have some rules, and you just want people to follow most of the rules most of the time, and then you can
Right.
feel like you're living in a. It's like it's okay, it's good.
It's so interesting because wasn't one of the places that actually were that was a safe haven for those that were anti-mask was like Texas, right?
Yeah,
That
in
was a
Florida,
huge
yeah, both the
in
governors
Florida.
had declared like, yeah, they, different governors around had decided, hey, we're not doing this. And then, like in the Nordic countries, I think it was Sweden or Norway, one or the other, decided they were going for herd immunity. There was just like no masking. This is also a very communitarian oriented culture, right? Like Korea. And they said, this is how we're going to do it. We know that in the end, this virus is not going to go away until everybody gets it, or most people get it. The herd gets it, which is, most people. And so
Right.
we're going to operate on the idea that we're going to protect the vulnerable, people with preconditions and that sort of thing, right? People who
Right.
are really old. So they protected all sorts of people. But
And
they
this is
said
East
otherwise,
Asia,
yeah, no, this is I think it was Sweden, if or Norway, one or the
Sweden.
other, right?
Right.
And so they decided that was how they were going to deal with the virus. And then
How did they
everyone
do that? Did
they
they like
just
just
let
have
they told people just keep living your lives, man. Don't worry about masking. Just like live your lives, like whatever. We're
right?
not we're not canceling school. You're going to go to school, send your kids to school. They don't have to wear masks. We're just going to do one thing after another.
So what was
And
their version?
at first it didn't look like it was going to go very well because like, oh my God, so many people were getting the virus. But in the end,
Right.
it worked out pretty much like everywhere else. This is like, it wasn't
Right.
that different than a place like Texas.
So
Yeah.
they kind of had foresight that it was like inevitable.
Well, but they took a risk. But they're scientists. They're the people that do community disease work, right? What they
Right.
study. They said, "Hey, this thing's going to be dangerous, and people are going to die. And if we go the opposite direction, people are going to die anyway. But we're going to bank on
Right.
the fact that the faster we get to herd immunity, because this thing could just keep going on forever. But the faster we get to herd immunity, the better off we're going to be." And
Right. That
people
makes
were coming
sense.
and going. Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. It made sense for a small
Yeah.
nation like that. For a big one like
Mm.
the US, it's a little bit it's more complicated. But
So that
there,
doesn't right.
yeah, but people will follow that, you see. And because people trust in their government in Scandinavia, people in Korea basically have a trust in their government. And so they
Would
trust in society. So you can do that there, but you can't do that here.
do you
So
think they have the same rebellious nature that like Americans have that would like want to def like people are saying mask like my grandmother, like oh let's we I don't want to say rebel. I'm not trying to paint it in a bad light. Um, just in like
No,
more so not
you know,
trusting or
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like are
Like
people in Sweden like that or would they just
no,
follow
no, no,
what
no,
the
no, no. People in
herd do?
Sweden very much look. They've built a good society in all the Scandinavian, in Finland, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Iceland. Those are societies that are much more lean toward communitarian moral codes. Okay, much like very much
Mm,
like Japan and Korea. And so
got it.
the idea is
Right, that makes
you know,
sense.
we've built a good society here. They pay half their income in taxes. The wealthy, the people who are really wealthy pay even more than half their income in taxes.
Wow.
But you get a lot for it, man. A lot of stuff is taken care of. It's just, life is pretty damn nice, so you can be a worker and you're it's not like here in the United States. If you deliver Amazon packages or whatever, I don't know, you work, you're a barista in a coffee
Factory
shop.
worker. Right,
Yeah,
right.
you're not you don't you're going to struggle. I mean, you're going to struggle putting your kids through school. You're going to struggle with all sorts of things that you're not going to struggle with in a society like that. So you're also
Wow.
less likely to be to make a lot of money because we're taxing it, but we're taxing it to build a good society. And so,
Right.
Americans, I'm sure right now there are tons of people on the stream. If anyone's commenting, they're like going like, "Oh yeah, I wouldn't really want that." But maybe you've never lived in a place like that where it's like, "Damn, I could live here. This is pretty nice." Like, yeah, I'm not gonna get fabulously wealthy or whatever it is, but like all my stuff is taken care of, man. It's really nice. It's
Like
really,
there's less
really nice.
stress.
Less stress,
And
man. It's just like live in the average world. It's very, very nice.
I did want to bring up
37
because
hour work weeks,
I did want
this
to bring
kind of
up with
stuff.
the COVID vaccine and masks. One of the things that you said was like we've been working on the tech for like 10 years. I think it was actually 20, and COVID-19
Yeah.
was one strain or one type of the particular virus that we had been
Yeah.
studying for a very long time. Just like the flu, every year there's a new vaccine. It's not like, hey, we just started working on the
Yeah.
new flu vaccine and we're
Yeah.
starting from scratch. And then the other thing with masks, at the very very beginning, um, Dr. Fauci and many other people were saying don't buy N95 masks. And the reason was because that's the type of mask that they use at hospitals. And for
Yeah.
a true N95 mask, it actually gets fitted to each person. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not like Sam and I could share. Like it's not like I could have a box and then he can take one and I can take one. The masks that we used eventually that everybody had were not N95 quote unquote, but there were many who labeled them as such where they had the same
Yeah.
materials, but they
Yeah.
weren't fitted for you.
Yeah.
And so it's also true that a lot of the with what masks did was it kept all of your germs to yourself, regardless of if a particular, if it helped every single time, maybe not, but like if you go to the grocery store 50 times and you sneeze 5 of those times, how
Yeah.
many of those
Yeah.
left your mask when everybody was worried about COVID?
Yeah.
Probably not too many of them. Probably maybe
Well,
one.
well, yeah, and the other side is we had very few instances, or we had very little space. There was some research done where there were communities of people where everyone wore masks correctly, right? Like they were fitted well to their faces and they wore them correctly. And they saw that like, yeah, the masks were far more effective. But mostly, we didn't see that. And so so the problem is, yeah, and they didn't want people to make runs on masks, just like they made a run on toilet paper. Man, like don't lose your damn minds. And you see how quickly people can lose their damn minds, man. And like you got to stop that. So you can
Well,
be like,
people
yeah,
people did go out and get all like a ton of masks. Like I
yeah,
lived with
oh
somebody
my
who worked
God,
in the healthcare industry the entire time of COVID, and it was like you have to use the same masks for days instead of using one for
yeah,
every single
yeah,
time that you go into a new room. No, you're using the same mask until you literally cannot use it anymore. And that
yeah,
was what we were trying to
yeah.
avoid at the very beginning, but um it didn't
Well,
happen. Like it didn't happen as they
yeah,
wanted it to.
yeah. Well, the other side is, and again, I'm just like speaking as a sociologist, that you got uh it, it what the most important thing is crowd control in a situation like this that's really scary and really frightening. And we don't know if the entire economy is going to just tank, right? We have no idea. We've never done this. Is a worldwide pandemic. It's different than it was 120 years ago with the Spanish flu. This is like the entire system could just come crashing down. And it's easy to look back and say, oh, but we could have done this or we could have done that. But in the moment, we had no idea, man, how you're
Right.
looking, everything is shutting down. Every single thing is shutting down. Lori and I would walk through town. It was a ghost town, man. All the students went home. Nobody came back. All the stores were closed. We were walking down College Avenue, the busiest avenue. We have two streets that go through our town. One is one way, it's called College Ave, and the other is the opposite direction called Beaver Ave. And these are the two main streets of the university. And where all the stores are, everything happens. The one goes right in front of the university. And we were walking right down the middle of the street. It was 8 at night on a Friday night. There was not a single car anywhere. We were just walking all around the streets by ourselves. There wasn't a soul out there. And I'm like, it was scary. Like, oh my God, this like the whole system could come crashing down. And so then you get what you needed were leaders to come forward and say, listen, here's what we're going to do. Like, we're all going to do this and we're all going to do that. And don't question it and just do it. Like, we're all going to mask. Just every time you leave your house, put a mask on. We needed that. And people forget how valuable that was. And if we had said at that point in time in our society, hey, we're going to go toward herd immunity, and what we're going to do is just go out. We know people are going to die, but that's all right. Like, are you kidding? In this society, man, what do you mean people are going to die? Then you have half the people that are going to have their guns out fighting hunting down people who they think have COVID and stuff. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's crazy. Or hunting down the decision makers who are making that what they would think would be an absolute crazy decision. And then you go the opposite side. It's like, okay, everyone's going to have to follow the same thing that everybody else follows. And then the other half of the people are feeling lost. So it's like, man, it is just an absolute, it was a frightening time. And so anyway, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. That's insane. You're just walking the streets and there's just no one there. Like it
Nobody,
was
man.
really
It
wow.
was it was retching. It was so like I felt so much. I never felt that level of anxiety in my life. To
Wow,
think,
really?
yeah, this was like 3 weeks after spring break. Spring break's when everybody
You,
left and nobody ever came back.
you know
So
what's so
this
interesting?
was like, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So just some people had such a different reality. Like my reality, Sam, is I worked throughout the whole COVID-19 because as a wine sales rep, E&J
Yeah.
Gallo, E&J Gallo was considered an essential worker, or to be a wine rep, I was considered an essential worker, but
Oh
other
my God.
wine,
People gotta have their
yeah,
wine.
yeah. And like other wine companies actually like had their sales reps stay home. But E&J Gallo saw it as an opportunity to take
Uh,
over the spaces because all the other wine
uh,
reps were going to be home. And so
that's intense. Wait, so
yeah,
you were going to like state stores and places where they were selling wine, and you were,
yep,
did,
I was
yeah,
in E&J Gallo is a grocery
yeah.
market, so I was going to the Targets, Walmarts, Rite Aid, CVS, anywhere you can think of. Any
Oh,
grocery
damn.
store.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
wild.
and so I didn't even notice a difference, to be honest. Like it felt like I was just living my life, just with the
Well, that's
mask on
wild.
everywhere I go.
Okay, all right. So,
Yeah.
so me, it was different in the sense that, I didn't stop. We taught from home. Jeff taught. Jeff was, Jeff, the first semester, I think we just, or the rest of
For
that
the
semester,
Yeah, it happened
we
during
just did
spring
our
break.
thing. But
So
the next year,
the second half of that semester
you
was
were up on campus, right?
so the so when COVID happened, it was during spring break that we got the announcement that it was pretty much going to be extended virtually. Like we were gonna not come back to school for another 2 weeks. That happened during spring break. So then
Yeah.
when we came back for the second half of the semester, you and I just stayed at home and then kind of jumped into a call like we're in now over Zoom, and we would stream from my computer and have class, and we would bring people in, and then the next year, which was I guess fall of 2020 and spring of 2021, uh, no one was on campus. The whole campus was shut down, and so you, me, and Niche I put a bunch of tech in two different rooms, connected them so that you didn't have to wear a mask because you were in a room all by yourself. That only you went in. Like I went in there to turn the TVs on and the lights on, um,
Yeah.
and then Niche and I would just sit with our masks on and sit on opposite sides of the room, and that was like that for two, maybe even I think it was 2 semesters like that, maybe even
Yeah,
three.
2 semesters. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was two. Yeah, and then
Wow.
but now listen, but imagine this town, this really poppin' town, absolutely empty, right? On a Friday night. Okay. This is like, so they said we thought we were going to close down for 2 weeks, and of course, then it was, but imagine just how unnerving that is to walk through a ghost town. Every light was out. Nobody was in any of the apartments, the dormitories, nothing. Nobody. Once in a while, there would be a light on that some students stayed here. But yeah, it was crazy. It was just scary, to think like, wow, what's going to happen to us, you know? And the biggest thing was the economy. When there's a place of, this happened in the economic, uh, in in you know 2008 for sure, when people were like, damn man, the whole thing was just like hours away from collapsing. And I listened to some bankers talk about this afterwards. It's like, people that we don't realize how close this interconnected global economic system is to potential collapse with the right,
Wow.
computer virus and the right, like, oh man, it's just, yeah, it's crazy. So, I mean, there are
Wow.
protections everywhere, but
And yet we keep
So that's
messing
what
with
things.
AI.
Mm.
what's that?
I said them, and yet we keep messing with AI.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? We can't not do that. It's like humans, right? We can't
Yeah.
we can't not do these things. And so that's like, well, you know. So that's where we're at. I don't know how we started. How did we start on this, by the way? Oh,
Cool. We
electricity. The electricity thing.
yeah. Wow,
Yeah,
that just we
yeah.
just went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That was cool. That was cool
yeah.
though. I haven't had an in-depth discussion about COVID-19 like this, and I don't think I've had a discussion like this. Actually,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting
wow.
because what's I think is really valuable is that right now we've had enough distance from COVID that people are able to now start to look back on it and see what we got right and what we got wrong. That's why this one book I think is really valuable. It's these two professors from Princeton. One's a political scientist and the other does health policy, I think.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
uh and the one who's a political scientist studies democracy and democratic practices, right? So I
Right.
think that we're able to look back and say, hey, well, what, yeah, again, what we get right, what we get wrong. And that's important that we do that, for the next time, But when
Right.
I listened to them, and I read different excerpts from the book, and I listened to them talking, they did an hour and a half talk. And I generally, that's the way I want to read a book. I mean, I don't have time to read a book like that, but I listened to their
Mm-hmm.
thoughtful summary of it. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's good, but there's also what I see with a lot of folks, and I do this too, is we look back and we rewrite history in a way. Lori's always accusing me of rewriting history, but we got to remember how really frightening this was, man. The bankers, man, everybody was just like, oh my God, this could just collapse. And so, that's a crazy thing. So
Wow.
that's where we're at, man. All right. Is there anything is there anything from class yesterday? Any comments or questions
Well, let
or
me
anything? Or
see. Um, from this discussion, Axel asked, "Are there any research programs about an emergency that would happen in a society?"
all over the place, people are studying this. Yeah. I mean, there are people who are that's their work is to figure out alternative and large scale responses to crisis situations. So many people study this. There are like just so many fascinating things, right? Like I remember I was reading this thing not long ago about people that get caught in a fire. Like here, this would be like an example of stuff. This is small scale. This isn't big scale, but guaranteed, like down in Florida, where we have hurricanes come in, and people they gotta get people away from the coast as quickly as possible without panic. And so people they spend a lot of time studying how to do that, and they do it differently, and they change the signage, and they change. You gotta try to people don't follow directions, and they don't listen very well, so you gotta have other ways to make it happen so that people kind of have to do certain things. Which roads to block, they got blocked off and got like sent off in this other direction, uh, kind of thing, because people study. But one was when you have like a doorway, a single emergency exit, and let's say there's an emergency and you got like 100 people trying to get out this door. And so these people discovered, what you want to do is you want to put a pole, a big pole, like 12 to 14 inches, right in front of the door. Not right in front, like 4 feet away from the door, but right in the middle of the door. And you force people to have to go around, to form two lines around the door, so they don't all bunch up in the doorway and then somebody trips and then everybody gets stuck right there. And that's what happens oftentimes in a fire. Somebody trips and falls over, and then they clog up the door. And they said, you put a pole right there, and you force people to form two lines around the pole, and then the two lines get out, because it's never more than two people trying to get out the door. There's
Mhm.
stuff like that. Like that's pretty wild, right? Can you picture that in your mind's eye?
Well, I'm trying to wait. Can you say that one more time?
So
A
you got a
little.
door, right?
Mhm.
And imagine, you got 100 people that are going to try to get out that door really, really fast.
Right.
Okay. And, it's
Hmm.
dangerous. You can't, what's going to happen is somebody's going to trip, and then it's all over. It just says
Yep.
people start tripping over themselves, and you got to walk over people and stomp on them. And so, people die like that, all sorts of stuff, right? Or it just gets clogged, and then something like fire or smoke inhalation, and then people die.
Right.
So,
And then wait, you're
one,
relating that back to.
now I'm just saying, like, this people studying these kinds of emergencies and stuff, right? So what
Okay, okay,
they
okay.
came to was like, all right, take a big, like 12 to 14-inch post, right? Like good
Yep.
size, maybe 15 to 16-inch. And you measure like 4 to 5 feet away from the middle of the door, okay?
Hmm.
And put that post right there. So it looks like it's blocking the door, but it's not blocking the door. What it's doing is it's forcing 100 people who are trying to squeeze out their door to form two lines on either side of the big post. And then the
Oh,
two lines, they funnel out, you know, like in road.
right.
Go a little slower, don't
Wow.
fall, don't do what you need to do, don't clog up, don't fight your way out of there. Just get out in an orderly fashion, right?
Right. With
It's
those
wild,
small
isn't it?
adjustments.
A
Yeah, that's like
small
such a small
adjustment, man.
adjustment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Wow. And
anyway,
that's you're like I hear you like comparing that to just like the mask. Or I don't know if that's a small adjustment,
no, it's a
but
small adjustment. People think the mask,
right.
it didn't matter that Okay, look, the mask took a turn for the worse because people there were too many really important people who didn't follow, right? Like governors and
Right.
so on. But the mask, the important thing for the mask was to give people a a sense of, and of course, they didn't do this because people started questioning, and in our society,
Right.
in an in
It
a
was
in a different society, it worked. But you need people to not question, to feel like
right.
there's something they can control. Yeah, I can control the mask. And look, everybody else is doing the same thing. So we human beings,
Right.
we're controlling this thing. Like we have some control over this virus that appears
Right.
to be uncontrollable. And
Right.
so that's a really, really good thing. Like,
And
okay,
and it sounds like it also it's showing the civilian that the government cares about their position. Like in terms of like I
it's
want to feel
showing us
safe.
that,
Do you
yeah,
do you
yeah. Well, it's not that the government cares. It's just the sense that
what they need to
we
do?
got some kind of control over something, man. And you
Right.
like what people forget about is that, go back to the beginning of the pandemic, and we're all having the experience. Well, not everybody lived in a small town like I did, but even if you were in New York City or LA or wherever, it didn't matter. Like, the streets were relatively empty at times when they should not have been empty, and rush hours and so on.
Ah.
It is
Mm-hmm.
very unnerving. It's very scary. It makes us feel like the world's
An
out of
apocalypse.
control. And when enough
Yeah.
people feel, yeah, an apocalypse. And when enough people
Yeah.
feel like that, it makes us do really, really things that are not healthy for society. And so,
Right.
you gotta get calm, keep calm and keep on, or
Do
whatever
you
that
know
is.
anybody? Do you know anyone that goes into panic mode? Do you know people like that? That
Oh,
go
oh, uh,
I'm just thinking, well, I'm just asking,
yeah, I
wondering
do
because I
actually.
don't, you do? Because I'm
Yeah, I
like, I
do.
don't
Yeah,
know
for sure.
people that go into panic, but I will just wonder what it's like to be that person, or
Well,
like the
dude,
people that are like planning for
no,
doomsday, and they're like
no,
canning
it's
in their
yeah.
basement.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, no, I know those folks. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
do?
yeah, 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 yeah. And like, oh, I don't know. Why wouldn't you? I don't know. It's
Right,
crazy.
right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I know. I mean, I laugh
Hmm.
at it. I'm not laughing at them. I'm like, wow, shit. Yeah. Well, for me, I
You're
don't.
planning.
Yeah, like, listen, man. For a while, Lori and I were like, well, we should keep 5 gallons of water in the basement, right? We don't know. We're gonna
Right,
lose electricity. We're gonna, who knows, right? But then it was like,
right.
wait, 5 gallons of water, man. If there's like a serious issue that's apocalyptic level, 5 gallons of water is gonna get us about a week, right? And
Yeah,
like, come on,
right.
man. I don't need to be around. What I need is a gun with 2 bullets, one for Lori, one for me. That's it, man. Shit.
Facts. Facts. No one's opening
Yeah.
the book. No one's opening the book then.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I'll have to read the book. No, but like there's what made me think about from class? What you said from class that were like, man, like just how you went on that tangent about somebody's like, you're gonna die one day because the people that were overreact like that were just like skipping
Yeah.
class or taking the attendance and then leaving. And then,
Yeah.
yesterday, like 22-year-old young man like
Yeah.
died by stepping on and a wire that fell.
Yeah.
And
After
that's
this
just
storm. Yeah.
after the storm, and like you were saying that, right? Like, man, you're like we're all gonna die one
I,
day. And
he
it
might
was
have he
just
might have been a student in class. I don't know. I didn't see who he is. They didn't release his name.
right. Wow, that would be crazy. And just I wonder how that like there's not enough awareness of that. Like we're not in the present moment as I don't know, just I don't know. You just asked if there's anything from class,
Yeah,
and I just thought about that, and I thought about the kid that passed away, and I'm like, wow, it's so true. It's just like at
yeah,
any moment, the most freak accident could happen,
yeah,
and
yeah. No kidding.
and and I
Yeah,
wonder how like that panic mode like takes people out of that aware. Like I don't know what I'm trying to relate to, but
yeah. Well,
just
I don't even know what it is that leads us to panic. And by the way, it's a well, it led people to go out and buy toilet paper that they didn't need, right? But that's one thing.
right,
But if it keeps going, imagine that, the banks start shutting down and you can't get your money. And,
right,
and the banks are just like, well, we're just gonna sit tight right here because there's a run on the banks. And, I remember Lori and I walked up to the bank and we withdrew, I don't know, like $1,000 in cash. We're just like, yeah,
right,
we better just get more cash out, man. I don't know, just this kind of stuff, right? So it wouldn't take a lot. And so, $1,000 is nothing. I mean, we already had cash at home, but we was like, let's get another 1,000. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But
right.
it's crazy. Like we don't. It's it's a very fascinating thing, you know. And I'm
Just
normal.
like how,
I'm in me, and I was really stressed. And I think I was stressed because I think as a sociological thinker who's thinking about these things a lot, institutions and thinking globally and so on. And I
right,
was in contact with my friends all over the world, finding out like, wait, what's going on with you? How are people reacting? What are people saying, et cetera? But
right.
I think I was seeing that this thing could collapse. We could go into complete free fall collapse mode fairly easily. It is not. This isn't just fun and games, man. Like, woohoo, I don't have to go up to the office anymore. I can just work from home. That's not what this
Right.
is, man. There are whole supply chains that are, man, things are just right now, like you got all sorts of things happening between China and the US. China is like in in man, because of these
Wait,
tariffs. And we're going to
China's
be
in
in
what?
trouble too. But yeah, like they're in deep trouble, man, with all their manufacturing. Like they've organized their society around manufacturing all this stuff, send out around the world. And
Right.
that's all. It's been seriously disrupted. Not everywhere, but in lots of places. And so it's like, wow, man.
Because of Trump's
It's
new
a
mandate
yeah,
with
but
the tariffs.
we're gonna have this. We have the same thing. There are lots of areas in the U.S. where we're gonna feel a very similar thing. And like for example, I was reading that the people here who manufacture, there are certain things that people manufacture that they can't get any. They're not going to be able to get any of the parts that they need from China. And so it's
Right.
like the Chinese are first because they're not manufacturing a lot of stuff, right? They're going to just like say, hold on, we got to put a pause on all these machines. But we're going to be second because we need all those things. So it's like there are all sorts of folks in the US whose livelihoods are going to tank.
Wait, we're
And
gonna be
it's
second in priority to China, you're
yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. For when the real, but yeah,
Right.
just all
Because
sorts
they're
of stuff. So
because they're like we're gonna be punished essentially by this.
yeah,
Like from
yeah, yeah,
China.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. So yeah, we still haven't felt the effects, but we're going to feel the effects, essentially, is like what you're saying.
Yep, yep. We're definitely the whole world is.
Wow. Yeah, I can't even wrap my head around that, to be honest. Of like
Yeah. Well,
what that's gonna feel like.
yeah. Well, you know, it's not going to be anything like it was in COVID, that's for sure. But and you may not feel it at
Right.
all, but there are all sorts of sectors of the economy that are
Right.
going to have this experience.
Right.
So
Do you think like the
it's
middle class will be
crazy.
affected
So like,
heavily because of that?
Well, some people will be. Some people already have been. We've lost how many people have lost their jobs? And just losing the job has an impact on all sorts of people in one's orbit, you know.
Right.
And and they want to, fire more government workers. It's not it's government workers, man. These are human beings in their livelihoods.
Yeah.
This is incredibly destabilizing to um to a system, so yeah, I don't know. It's
Right.
it's like
Man.
always got to be thinking like systems level, and then not you can't make too much of it. It's like what I was trying to do yesterday with those two examples of the trans, what to do
Uh-huh.
with people who are trans, and then what to do with people who, with discrimination, right? It's like you gotta you gotta take it really seriously, but then you can't take it too seriously, right? You have to look one way, but you got to turn around and look in the opposite direction. And
Hmm.
it's a nonstop uh, process, or it's a nonstop kind of uh, way of analyzing things, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
I loved your that just brings me back to like when you were like, what is fairness? I loved your like that question and how people were this is might be a little bit different than what you're talking about, but it just brought when you brought up class, it made me think about that. But
mhm.
it was making me think like what is fairness? And my answer to that was like you have to get ever more complex to reach fairness. Like you have to like I
Yeah,
think the more complex that you get, the more fair that you're becoming. And that like because
uh,
you're saying you're getting all positions. But if you stop at complexity, like you don't continue to progress through complexity, then you're stopping the exploration and the
oh
examination,
yeah, I like that. That's
right?
a really nice way to say that. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
I
Because I
wasn't
was gonna raise
saying
my
that.
hand and say that.
Yeah, you
Ah,
should have.
okay.
I wasn't saying that necessarily, but I would have said that. Yeah, I wish I had have thought of that. Yeah, you're right. You have to go toward greater complexity. Yeah.
Okay,
Which
that you,
ironically then becomes fair, right? It's just odd.
right. Yeah, because like when you kept saying we need to get more and more positions, that kept making me relate that to complexity. Like the more and more positions that you're getting, uh, you know, you're layering it more and more and more.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
exactly, man.
um
Yeah,
which was really cool to think, okay, like that's a
yeah,
cool way to look at fairness.
yeah,
Um
yeah, that's right.
and I the way you flipped it in class was so cool too because like the Brazilian guy Luis was
Yeah.
it Luis?
Yeah,
It was
Louise.
Luis.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he had a total different he was like I wouldn't be comfortable with my sister. Um
Yeah.
but then or like yeah, I wouldn't want like a trans that
Yeah.
has to go to the bathroom that to the sex they were assigned at birth.
Yeah.
Uh, or but then it's like as soon as you realize like, oh, well, this person is actually very, very masculine, and your
Yeah,
sister,
right, right, right.
and it's like,
Right.
does that actually make you comfortable? And it
Yeah.
made me think about that differently. It's like, huh, okay.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, how
know,
comfortable are you? How about just a woman that how about a trans woman who was born as a man, right? And then
uh-huh.
she walks in the bathroom. You've definitely women have been in bathrooms with people who were
Yeah.
born as men and transition and they didn't even know it, man. You know? And
Wow.
so like just do that. Like it's all right. It's not a big deal.
Right. Right. Because
I was in the bathroom once with a trans man who was born as a woman, and because he's a colleague of mine, and we went to we a friend, a former student of mine who's now from many, many, many years ago, and we went to the bathroom together, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, there he is, and there were
you,
other men in there, and they had no idea that
right.
he
No,
used to be a she.
right. Sam, I think, to me, like one time when I was in I went to California with my producer friend. that I used to make music with, and we became really good friends. And he was asked to be a sperm donor, right? And for this trans male,
Hmm.
um, and so he asked me to come with him, and I just had the opportunity to go to Cali, and I was like, heck yeah, man! I go with my boy to Cali and went and did it, and the person that he was being a donor for was a trans male, and when I tell you, like, to me, I really felt like he was bro. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
there was nothing in me that was like that felt like misaligned. Like it just felt so real. It felt so
yeah,
authentic, the way he was coming off.
yeah,
I was like, yeah, man, you really. And supposedly when he before he transitioned, he was like a lesbian and went like, very had a lot of like masculine energy. And
yeah,
then when he made that transition, it's like, wow, yeah, you can definitely tell that you didn't feel like you were in your body.
yeah,
And
yeah,
now you feel like you are. And it was just, man, I had so much love for that person. And
yeah.
the one thing that I wanted to bring up in class, but it felt a little controversial, like controversial when what I was thinking about was like how do you screen for the people that like how do you know if it is or isn't authentic?
Well,
You know, like
that,
the and how do
yeah,
and
yeah, that's a
because like
question. What do you mean by
and
authentic?
I guess I mean this is what makes it feel risky, but I guess I mean authentic by like man, I have a concern for like someone in my family, but it's like how do we know that like developmentally like that they're okay and that
Yeah, yeah.
like and that if this is actually more of something that's like cognitive or like maybe they're just unsure, they don't know, and they're just making a decision that they think is right,
Well,
but
the
they
more,
don't
okay, so
know or
yeah, so here's the way I would
um,
say this.
yeah,
Understand that the more open we are about this, the more people are going to experiment, right? Like when you ask
yeah,
college students on average, like you ask the average college students today in 2025, how many of you are bisexual? The number went from, when you were born, the answer to that was like 6%, 7%, right?
mm-hmm,
Today it's like 16%.
right,
All right. Because everyone's just like, yeah, all right, yeah, sure, yeah, well, okay, sure, I'm bisexual. Okay, so,
right,
well, you're really not, but you're open to whatever. You're open to experimenting, even though you haven't experimented. You're open to what might happen, even though it probably won't happen. You're open to all sorts of things, right? So people just are,
right,
well, we also know the more we talk about trans issues, more the more we talk about like gender being, uh, not being gender specific, the more we open that up. Well, it's kind of it. First off, it's kind of a cool thing, It's like, yeah, kind of dig the masculine, I dig the feminine. This is all pretty cool. Like, all right, I like
mm-hmm,
that, you know.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
So then we open to it, and then we suddenly just start opening other doors, and then we're just like, ah, well, all right. So we know that that's going to happen. But if we have an open conversation as a society, then most people who they open a door and think, well, I'm experimenting. I have so many people in my class, for example, they choose to volunteer, and yeah, when I was in high school, I was really exploring being non-binary. Okay. And for a while,
right,
I thought it was really non-binary, and maybe I was trans, but I'm not. I'm through that now. I'm not. That's not me. So whatever. I get that. There
right.
are 3 people who have applied to volunteer this semester who have said that
Interesting.
same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Are you going to get more and
right.
more of that? And that's okay. Let people think about that stuff. It's not really a big deal. Now, when
True.
you got doctors, you got people who are willing to do surgery on people at a really young age after they've just started exploring that. Well, that's a huge problem. But mostly
That's
that's
what I'm
not
thinking about.
happening. Yeah, that's not happening though. It did happen a little bit, man. There were people who were like, there were some surgeons, some people doing medical procedures on people way too quickly, man. That
It's
absolutely happened, and that's a problem, and it
terrifying.
never should have happened. But
That's what makes me nervous, like,
and part of
because
the reason, yeah, but it's not happening. It's not. A bunch of people in the medical for
oh,
a
you
number of years when people
you're breaking out
all
a little bit.
right, how about now, man?
Wow,
How
it's
about
so
now?
crazy. Whenever you say,
Good.
yeah, you're like, how about now? And it just went, yeah, I missed like the first 10 seconds or like the last 10 seconds,
Okay, so probably there's a period
5
of
seconds.
time. There's a period of time when people were more quick to do surgical procedures
To
because they didn't
validate,
want to
right?
be they didn't want to be called transphobic. There's like, oh, I can't
Right,
discriminate against people. So it's like people
right,
were maybe a little faster. I don't know. But for sure some people were way too fast and they did stuff too quickly, man. And
right.
they didn't, but most people, there are protocols in place, and like, man, you got to go through a lot of therapy and a lot of counseling and a lot of stuff before you can get any kind of procedure, man. It's not like
Really?
you just
Is
go to
that
your
true?
doc. Yeah, man, you can't just go to doctor and you decide, hey, I need to start taking hormones because I've realized that I'm a woman and I'm not a guy. And they're like, all right, here's a prescription. That ain't happening, man. That's like,
So, okay,
you know,
that's in, well, oh man, that's interesting because like someone in my family is like currently taking hormones, but I'm not sure the depth of like how much consultation that they've
well, you
gotten.
should find
I'm
out
actually not
because
sure.
yeah, well, we're the establishment, the medical establishment is pushing. When I say it's not happening, it is happening underground, and it's happening with some
Right,
medical professionals who are very unscrupulous and have
right,
no business doing this. But everybody I'm talking to is like, not everybody, but people I'm talking to, it's like, no, 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 you gotta really
right.
go through the
And
ringer on this, man. Yeah.
they
And you
have
don't
been
know.
in like
You're not going to know about it. So you're not going to know that you wouldn't know that this person in your family has actually been in therapy for 2 years. Like you wouldn't know that. It's not the kind of thing that people go into therapy and tell everybody about, right? Like
yeah,
keep
with
that in
this
mind,
particular
right?
no, yeah, with this particular person, they it's been built on like the trust has been built where I've usually been the person that's been confided in.
Mm-hmm.
When and now that you're making me go back to think about it, and they have been talking about how, because I used to recommend, I was like, hey, before you decide to make any decisions, like I would go to groups, and have
Yeah,
conversations
yeah,
about
yeah,
this and figure out,
yeah.
what exactly feels right. And they actually went and did that. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, last time I visited, we had a conversation about therapy. So
Yeah, okay.
maybe, but I wasn't aware that that was the mandatory process for the hormones. I just thought that was like, okay, you're doing this to explore, to have a better understanding before you do it. But maybe that is like the process that they were going through in order to
Yeah,
achieve what they were
yeah.
trying to achieve.
Well, in the
Yeah.
in the this area of specialization in the
Oh, we're breaking out.
this area
Breaking up.
called
Still breaking
in this
up a little
area
bit.
specialization. Uh, uh,
I just give a
right.
minute to
Dang.
I might have
reconnect.
to like,
We're just waiting
all
on you,
right, how about
Sam.
now?
A little better. I could kind of hear it.
Oh,
Yeah, now you
Now
should be
here we
good.
go.
can you get me? All right, we're gonna have to cut anyway. Well, this will be the last thing. In this area of specialization, in the medical establishment, the idea is with all doctors is do no harm. And so, there people are really putting their heads together and saying, all right, how do we do this, man? There are huge conferences where all these people doing this work, they go to the conferences, they're teaching one another, they're working with one another. It's not just a bunch of knuckleheads out there. They're on their own.
Right.
So
Right.
anyway, I
When
just
you
want to say
said
that.
no, yeah, it makes me think like
There
I
are a
remember
few
how
knuckleheads out there though. Like, don't think, yeah, there are some. So like, but there are people that do
yeah,
down in Brazil that do butt implants from their kitchen. You know what I mean? And they kill
I've heard
people.
about
So
that.
like, whatever.
That was on
All right, man, listen,
there's yeah, yeah.
we should go,
Yeah.
man. I gotta. All right,
Yeah,
y'all,
we had a
listen.
good
Hopefully, next week we'll have some, we will have internet.
hoping.
All right, y'all. All right,
All
man.
right,
Jeff, I
Sam.
hope you've enjoyed playing Minecraft.
Dude, of course. It's been so much fun.
Uh,
It's
I
funny.
even beat the
all
end of the
right, man.
game
All right,
while
we'll
we
be
were
in touch with you
talking.
guys. Be
Enjoy
well.
the good weather, Sam.
Ah, yeah, man. Be well.
You
All
be
right,
well,
ciao.
boss. See you guys.
Alrighty, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We will be live tomorrow for the final class of the semester. I know it's already come down to the end, but we got one more class, and then we should be doing office hours at least. I'm going to try to get Sam to do it at least once a week, at a minimum throughout the summer. So thank you all for a great semester, and it's been fun beating Minecraft while listening to the two of them chat. See you all later.